Okay, I think we can get started here. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today for the pre-proposal conference for the development of an arts and culture plan for the city of Rochester and Monroe County. We will start off with a couple of introductions from the local team, and then I will give you just a quick overview of the context of our area, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Heather to walk through the key points of the RFP, and then we will follow that up with some questions and answers from you, from this group. And so feel free to, well, I guess I'd ask you to hold off questions until we get to the Q&A, whether it be in the chat or we'll be able to call on people as well. I think this is a small enough group that we can call on people, but we'll explain more when we get to that point. But first, my name is Kevin Kelly. I work for the city of Rochester. I'm the manager of the Office of City Planning. And we have, I think, two other people from the city here. So I'll turn it over to Heather to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Heather Anderson, Associate City Planner for the City of Rochester. And I'm going to popcorn it over to Johanna.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Johanna Brennan, and I'm with the City Law Department.
Thanks, Johanna and Heather. And my colleagues help me out. Am I missing anyone else from the city or county that's here? All right, I think we're good. Great. Well, we really appreciate everybody joining us today. Looking forward to a good discussion and hearing from you, and hope that this will be useful for you to get a better understanding of what the city and county are looking to do with this project. And again, we can have a conversation later with questions that you have, but you'll also be able to submit written questions afterwards if you think of things later. And that ability or opportunity is open to other consultants that are not able to join us today. But Heather will walk you through all of the key points of the timeline related to that a little bit later in the presentation. So Heather, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So just a little bit of background about the city and county and some of the investments that we've been making recently that sort of are bringing us up to this point of wanting to do an arts and culture plan. The city of Rochester is, and excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse today. I have a little bit of a cough, so appreciate you bearing with me with that. The city is located in upstate New York. If you're not familiar with Rochester, kind of at the convergence of the Great Lakes and the Finger Lakes. We're in a really wonderful location in New York State. The city is a little bit over 200,000 people. And we reside within Monroe County, which is 750,000 people. And if you count some of the surrounding counties in sort of the metro area, we're a metro area of about 1 million people, with the heart of that metro area being the city of Rochester. And within Monroe County, there are 19 towns and 10 villages. Next slide. So let me walk you through some of the key milestones and developments that have happened in recent years that have sort of brought us to this point. Some of this is reiterated in the RFP, but good to just get it in the context here. So back in 2007, we actually developed a city arts policy, which created this ordinance for the percent for the arts, where we were setting aside 1% of the total development costs of capital projects every year, city funded capital projects. So basically creating a pot of money to spend on public art specifically. That was passed in 2007. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to get into today, it wasn't really implemented all that much over the last, or over the next 12 to 13 years or so. It was sort of sporadic. A few things were funded, but it wasn't consistently funded, and we didn't have an internal champion to really coordinate it. So it's been on the books for a while, but it was actually under the last mayor, Lovely Warren, that the idea was resurrected to really focus on our Percent for the Arts program and make sure that we dedicate money every year to it, and to actually have staff dedicated to ushering that and making sure it was happening. And she tagged us in the Office of City Planning to do that work. The city of Rochester does not have any kind of arts and culture department or division or anything like that. That's kind of unfortunate. We would like to work towards that. Hint, hint, this plan might give us the framework for moving in that direction. But in the meantime, Heather and I in the Office of City Planning are the two main people that are doing that work. We're happy to do it. We love this work. But we do want to expand the city's capacity to be more intentional investing in the arts. So that is sort of, that effort is kind of centralized in our department, especially with a Percent for the Arts program. But we also have many colleagues in other departments that are investing in arts and culture as in addition to the other things that they do. So we have a special events group. We have our recreation department that invests in particular in young people around the arts, and our library has artistic programming and all that sort of thing. So multiple departments are investing, but we don't have a centralized arts and culture department per se. So back in 2019, the City Planning Office also developed the Rochester 2034 Comprehensive Plan. There is a link in the RFP to the arts and culture section of that plan. I encourage you all to read that. It gives a nice blueprint for the things that we're trying to do. And this arts and culture plan will really take that to the next level. But because we had that section in the plan, that is the reason why the Office of City Planning was sort of tagged to steward the Percent for the Arts program. And so we really kind of jump-started that back in 2021. And by kind of formalizing the process, but also in that same year, two important developments were the development of an external stakeholder group called the AC3. AC3 stands for Arts and Creative Community Committee. It's about a dozen or so local creatives that we serve as sort of an advisory board to the city on how we develop these programs and how we spend money on public art. At the same time, we developed an internal team called the City Arts Team, or the CAT, which includes folks from different departments within City Hall. And Johanna was one of those folks that we work closely with, and other departments as well. So the AC3 and the CAT meet pretty regularly and often meet together to make decisions about how we're going to spend the Percent for the Arts money. That's the main thing that we work on. But we also collaborate on some additional arts and culture investments related to that. And this plan is kind of the main thing outside of the Percent for the Arts program that the AC3 and the City Arts Team are working on. So that's what brings us here today, to seek a consultant or team of consultants to assist us in the development of an arts and culture plan. And Heather will get more into what specifically we're looking to get out of that plan. But those are some key milestones and key developments that sort of brought us to today. Next slide. And then just real quick, just to give you a sense of how much we have been investing in arts and culture in our community, both the city and the county. It's a good amount, but we would definitely like to see this increase, and we need the sort of infrastructure and framework to increase our investments and have them be more coordinated. So since 2016, we've invested over $2 million in public funding for arts and culture, and that includes both capital art, public art, but also includes some operational funds for events and performances and such. We are also involved, when I say we, the City Arts Team and the AC3 are involved in the support of creation of a nonprofit arts alliance. This is a really key thing to understand about the Rochester context, is unlike most cities, we do not currently have an active non-for-profit arts alliance type organization that is sort of the local advocate and organizer for the arts and culture ecosystem in Rochester. We had one years ago, the Greater Rochester Arts and Culture Council. It has since folded. Long story there. You'll hear about it if you're selected, I'm sure. But as we are parallel to this plan, we are involved with, but not leading, the effort to reestablish a nonprofit arts alliance. It's really key for the Rochester area. And the plan could potentially help inform that process, but it is already underway. And as far as the county is concerned, that's right, go on the next one, thanks. The county has also invested quite a bit into the arts and culture scene here in Rochester. And for years, those first two bullets, they've been doing this for years in terms of investing in tourism and event spaces and larger arts and culture institutions. They've received a lot of feedback from the community about how there's been a lack of funding and support for smaller and mid-sized arts organizations and festivals. And they have consistently ramped that up over the last few years to some impressive levels. So, excuse me, we're grateful to be partnering with Monroe County on the development of this plan and support them in the way that they are investing in that part of our economy. It's important for me to point out the sort of relationship between the city and the county here. I think Heather will talk about this a bit more too, but the city currently has a very strong relationship with the county. And I mention that because it has not been strong in past years, where it's better now than it has been in decades, some would say. So we're really excited about partnering with them. This particular plan is really meant for the Rochester area, but acknowledge with a strong focus on the city, because we acknowledge that the vast majority of arts and culture activities and artists themselves are located in the city of Rochester. But the arts and culture scene or ecosystem really knows no municipal boundaries, as you could imagine. So there's lots of artistic activity happening outside of the city as well. But we do want this plan to have a strong focus on the city while recognizing sort of the larger Rochester area within Monroe County as we look to develop this plan. Okay, hopefully that's enough context, and you're certainly welcome to ask us questions later to clarify any of that if you want to understand that context a little bit more. But with that, I will turn it over to Heather, who, by the way, will be the project manager for this arts and culture plan for the city and county, and she can talk you through the RFP. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the RFP. This is not going to be a complete inventory of the RFP. Today, we really intend to provide a roadmap for you of the RFP, highlighting some important items along the way. We're hoping to create a good foundation for the Q&A and discussion with you afterward. So to create the arts and culture plan, the city and county are looking for a consultant or a team of consultants. As a side note, we want to make sure that we provide an opportunity for people that are interested in partnering with other groups, that opportunity. So please feel free to enter your information in the chat if you are looking to partner with another organization on this RFP. We'll remind you of that again later. So we're looking for a consultant or a team of consultants, ideally with a diverse project team and experience with developing arts and culture plans and or other types of plans, working in racially and ethnically diverse communities with high poverty rates. Rochester is a majority minority city, so that is a big priority for us. We're looking for folks that have experience engaging a broad range of residents and stakeholders and designing high quality graphic materials. There's some other information about experience that we are prioritizing on page 3 of the RFP as well. So in the actual plan, we're looking for generally overall, we're looking for a graphically rich, user-friendly, and implementation-oriented document. We expect a vision, goals, and actions to guide decision-making. Some goals have already been identified with the City Arts team and the AC3 stakeholder group, and those are listed in the RFP, so please pay special attention to those. Those are kind of the minimum number of goals that we expect to have in the plan. We also want to emphasize that we want the plan to have a focus on cultural equity. And you can find more information on pages 6 and 7 of the RFP for what we're looking for. So this is the scope of services. It's listed on pages 10 to 12 of the RFP and includes all of these items. We definitely want to note that all of these items include the larger context of the county, with one exception. The Public Art Master Plan is the only item in the plan that will be exclusively focused on the city. We also want to point out that this scope is the minimum for the plan. We encourage you to consider whether you would recommend additional components. So the required proposal contents are on pages 13 to 15 of the RFP and listed here. There are a few specific to this RFP that we wanted to note or discuss with you. The project statement, please note, requires a persuasive statement on the value of arts investment in a city experiencing significant challenges, such as violence and multi-generational poverty. We are also asking you to provide times that your project team would be available for an interview the week of October 2nd. We plan to interview finalists, so please make sure you give us available time so that we can schedule an interview with you if you are selected as a finalist. We wanted to highlight the proposed approach and scope of services section here to emphasize that this is one of the places for you to show us what you are about and a great place to show us how well you are organized. We want to know how you would approach the plan. It will be difficult to score proposals that do not clearly communicate their approach in this section. And lastly, we want to point out the budget. We have $200,000 for the arts and culture plan. And of that $200,000, $20,000 is committed to specific community engagement strategies outlined in the RFP. So here's a refresher on the evaluation criteria. Clearly, the biggest category is proposal quality, which includes the overall quality, clarity, and completeness of the proposal, the value and effectiveness of the proposal as evidenced by the experience of project team members and feasibility, and an evaluation of project understanding and the proposed approach section. A note about bonus points. The city includes these bonus points for all RFPs. It's part of the city policy for contracts over a certain amount. The location preference is relatively straightforward. The minority and women-owned business enterprise bonus is awarded to any consultant that is a New York State certified MWBE or will use a state certified MWBE as a subcontractor for a certain amount of the work. We understand that many of you are from out of state, so it is not likely that many of you will be eligible for that bonus. However, you may be eligible for the workforce goals, so we want to emphasize that. The city has the goal of having 20% of paid contract time paid to minority workers and 6.9% of paid contract time to women workers. So if your project team is a minimum of 20% minority workers and 6.9% women workers, you could receive these bonus points. We wanted to end the presentation on the timeline for the RFP. As Kevin mentioned, we'll be posting the recording of this meeting on the RFP webpage after the meeting. The deadline, the next kind of milestone is the deadline for questions. So the deadline for questions is 11:59 p.m., Friday, August 25th. We will post the responses to those questions as well as the questions from this meeting by the following Tuesday, August 29th. And additionally, we will email the responses to everyone who has emailed with a question or registered for this meeting. Proposals are due by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, September 12th. We ask that you email the proposal in PDF format to me. Questions are also emailed to me, please. If the proposal is too large to email, you can feel free to use a large document share app such as Dropbox. We're okay with that. As mentioned, we'll be notifying finalists to schedule interviews for the week of October 2nd. And after selection notification, the award will need to be approved by City Council. In the interim, we could get started on a professional services agreement, which is our term for the contract. The RFP includes a PSA template to give you an idea of what that will look like. So feel free to take a look at that. It will be tailored, of course, to this project. And having said all of that, we expect the agreement start date would be in early January, and we expect the contract term to be 12 to 18 months. So now we'd like to open it up to questions. We ask that you either enter your question in the chat box or raise your hand, and we will call on you in the order that, as best we can tell, in the order that questions are received. We also want to remind you that if you are interested in looking for an organization to partner with, please put that information in the chat as well. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of your faces.
And
Okay.
Heather, I'll just add too that the providing your contact information in the chat for other organizations, companies to see is purely optional. This will not impact whether you team with somebody or not, will not impact your scoring per se. We, of course, are looking for the most well-rounded organization or team of organizations to respond to this, but it's not a requirement. So it's an optional thing if you want to provide that and if you're interested in partnering with somebody.
Okay, it looks, oh, sorry.
Sorry, one other thing I'll just mention with the link that I provided in the chat. I assume you've all probably seen the RFP, but that link also will take you to the RFP itself if you're trying to find the PDF for that.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, it looks like Victoria has the first question.
Cute. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for noticing me. That's great. I had a historical question that relates to the former regional group that was the Arts Advocate umbrella and also your EC3 internal team. So can you let me know whether libraries or heritage museums were involved or linked up to that former group, or are they included in the outside or internal team that you're working with right now?
Neither of us were involved with, or actually, yeah, we weren't really involved when the Arts and Cultural Council was active. So I'm not familiar if those types of groups were involved. If I had to guess, I suspect they weren't heavily involved. And we don't currently have representation from, well, we have some museums that we're partnering with on different things, but I think that's a sort of a part of the arts and culture ecosystem that could stand to be enhanced through this plan and through our efforts. Johanna or Heather, is there anything to add to that?
Yeah, though we do have library representation on the city arts team, and we do have some arts institution representation on the AC3 is the external, as the stakeholder group, and the CAT or the city arts team is the internal group. So we have a staffer from the library involved in the city arts team, and we do have some institutional representation on the AC3, but it is, as Kevin mentioned, about a dozen people on that group. So it's kind of a sample of arts institutions in the city.
So you said there were some institutions involved with your AC3 group.
Yeah.
Do you know if there are any heritage museums
Involved in AC3? No, they're
Okay,
not.
all right. Okay, and it's great to hear that your librarian is on the internal team. Way to go.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay, Martin, I believe you were next.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I actually have two questions just looking through the RFP. One is some clarification on you were talking about the Percent for Art program. It was a little confusing because I assume that the ordinance covers a public art because it's part of capital CIP. But is it provide options for general funding, for grant funding, for other uses of arts? Because it sounds like that was being looked at as a possible resource. So that was one question. The other one's just real quick. On page 8, you talk about another study around economic impact. And is that the AEP study, or is there something else that's happening there?
So Kevin, do you want to take the first question? And the second question is there's a study that the Rochester Area Community Foundation is a part of. And what is AEP? What are you what is that?
Sorry, Arts and Economic Prosperity with Americans for the Arts.
Okay.
Which is a national study that's being done on the local level, or if it was a separate study that's just being done in some other kind of way.
That's a good question. I can follow up with the Community Foundation to find out if it is that or if it's a different study. So we can follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as far as the use of the Percent for the Arts funds, they started out as being exclusively for capital projects, so physical installations of public art. We, in 2021, I think, amended the ordinance so that it's now, those funds are now eligible to be used, but we can use what we call operating funds. And so we can use those funds for non-capital public art that includes performances and arts education and some forms of temporary art, so long as that public art or those categories of public art have a clear public benefit to them. We can use those. I don't want to get into the weeds too much about this, but there is a little bit of a nuance here between the city's funding capabilities and the county's funding capabilities. They have a couple of fewer strings attached via state law to their funding amounts, and they can fund a little bit more types of things than we can at the city. So that's why our partnership is really important. But the percent for the arts can now be used for capital and non-capital public art.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Martin. Olivia, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I work with James Lima Planning and Development. We're placemaking and urban planning economic advisors. My question was about the location preference. It sounds straightforward, but the first question that came to mind was kind of how that's defined. I'm local to Rochester, but not my firm is remote. So wondering how that works.
Yeah,
this is why we have Johanna from the law department here, is to answer exactly such questions.
Yeah, you would need to have an office or a residence location in the city of Rochester to meet that bonus requirement.
Sorry, the firm or members of the team?
Well, we have typically said the firm itself.
Gotcha.
So if you're, in a firm that's in Cleveland and you just happen to live here, I'm not sure that would meet the qualification. But submit what you've got and we'll take a look at it.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, there's sort of the official ruling on the bonus points, which Johanna just described. But then if you don't meet that official requirements, there's sort of the softer side of the evaluation of all the proposals where that could certainly help you and your team. If we like, hey, somebody lives here, that's nice to know. They don't get the bonus points necessarily, but it's good to know that they've got somebody local. So
yeah, I confirm that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. Next up is Magdiel. I'm going to not pronounce your name correctly. Can you let me know how to pronounce your name correctly? I apologize.
I did.
Oh,
It's
nice.
actually Magdiel. Yeah.
Magdiel. Okay, excellent.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I work with Lower Cultural Resources, and my question is the minimum budget of $20,000 for the community engagement strategies inclusive of room rentals and other logistic expenses? Thank you.
It's a good question. So the 20,000 is intended for the specific strategies outlined in the RFP. So for artist engagement teams, which is a model that we're really following from Minneapolis, as well as stipends for what we're calling committed meeting participation. So either focus groups or people that are going to some kind of topic specific committees like recurring attendance. So it's intended for that. I think that there is some potentially within there some wiggle room, but we want to keep to that as much as possible. We do have at our availability a lot of city-owned spaces that we can use for meetings. So ideally, we're cutting down on things like room rentals by finding spaces that we can access for free. Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Magdiel. Excellent question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I see in the chat lots of people giving their contact information, which is great. And then the only question I see in there so far is, who will ultimately own the plan? Is this intended to serve as a strategic plan for the newly formed Cultural Alliance nonprofit? So that's a good question. We really intend this plan to be for and of all the stakeholders in the county. So on the public and private side, and to really guide decision making for all of those actors in that group. We don't intend this to be for the Cultural Alliance nonprofit. That's a separate effort that's happening that actually Rochester Area Community Foundation is leading a discussion around. And I think that there'll be some opportunities to kind of have crossover conversations about what they're doing, and specifically with a landscape analysis or kind of inventory of what's happening in the area and identifying who the stakeholders are and what their role will be moving forward. But that's a good thing to clarify that nonprofit will have its own strategic plan. And this is really about the other art stakeholders in the county, in the ecosystem, and how we can move forward. Kevin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just, yeah, so officially it's not being developed for that emerging group whenever that group materializes. But unofficially, it would be wonderful if the content of this plan was really useful for that organization once it's formed, in order to provide a blueprint for actions that should be taken. Because this really is about, while there is the public art master plan, that's sort of a subset of this project to really get into public art specifically in Rochester and physical locations and opportunities. The broader plan is really about the arts and culture ecosystem. And so we do expect that there will be some really useful recommendations and strategies laid out that would be useful for, well, I'll just say the main three organizations: the city, the county, and this eventual nonprofit Arts Alliance organization. We hope that there will be strategies that will be really useful for each of those groups. Sometimes there'll be things that all of us would do together. Sometimes some of those strategies might be just for the city, they might be just for the county, they might be just for the nonprofit, they might be for individual artists. We expect there to be a wide variety of strategies and recommendations to go after that would be useful to all of those entities.
Okay. There are no more questions yet in the chat, and I don't see any other hands up. Oh, here we go. Noor, you're next.
Thanks, Heather, and for that clarification for the earlier question. Just as a follow-up, is there a reason why a public art master plan was called out as a specific item or deliverable for the scope of work, whether that be a funding requirement or initial work had already begun on the city side? Just wanted to get some context on why that scope of work is called out here.
It's a good question. So there's two answers to that. One is from the city side, we've really been working from this place of hearing a lot of concerns, stakeholder concerns, and understanding as we put together the city arts team that we don't have a unified arts policy for the city. And city staff have really been working towards that, but we really are looking to this to really unify, to have like a consistent, unified approach to public art in the city. But also, the reason that we can use the $125,000 of the $200,000 budget is city funding. We're using percent for the arts funding. And the reason we can do that is because there is a public art master plan as part of that, because it's capital money, capital dollars that's committed to this. So it has to show that this is impacting future capital expenses.
Thank you.
And one other thing I'll add to that is that a key part of this plan is developing an inventory of what we already have in place in terms of public art throughout the city. And that's actually something that we're developing internally right now. So keep that in mind as you're developing a proposal in response to this RFP, that you won't necessarily have to dedicate a lot of time and resources to creating an inventory of public art throughout the city. We're actually doing that internally now. Now, it might not be perfect by the time we've got a consultant on board. It might be like 80% there or 90% there, and maybe we could use your help with sort of refining it or better organizing it or that sort of thing. But if we're going to develop a public art master plan, if the foundation has got to be, well, what do we have in place already? And we're working on developing that with GIS software right now. So hopefully that'll be a good head start on that aspect of the plan.
Okay, and next, Anne.
Hi, I was excited to see the emphasis on the artist-led community engagement and the funds set aside. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the envision process for that. I see, you've encouraged folks to volunteer information if you're interested in partnering, but are you imagining that identifying the sort of the lead artist community organizers would happen after the more traditional cultural planning firm is selected, or should we be trying to sort of shake the bushes to identify those collaborators already? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I would say we're not requiring folks to connect with artists beforehand. We expected that once we had someone selected, that we would work with the consultant or team of consultants to kind of identify, okay, are we going to do a call for artists? When are we doing that? Does the city need to do it before the contract starts, or is a consultant going to do that after the contract starts? Work out the timing with the selected consultant or team of consultants. Having said that, I think that getting to Kevin's discussion around the softer side of reviewing proposals, if you have time and you can connect with folks locally, that could make for a stronger proposal. Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
Maybe, and this is maybe just sort of a broader thought about this project that hopefully will be useful for you all as you develop your approach. Sort of related. I'm sure that if any of you have worked with artist communities before, you know that sometimes they can be sensitive and very, protective of the local artist community, which I think is a good thing, but can be challenging at times in terms of working with local stakeholders. We have some really wonderful people here, but they're very I guess I would say there's like a certain level of nervousness around the development of this plan. Heather and I have been working really hard with the AC3 to kind of make the case for why this plan is important for our community. And through that, I'd say there's been some nervousness just in general about the idea of an out-of-town consultant coming in, which you can imagine people would be nervous about in just about any kind of context, right? But we've definitely heard about that with this particular plan. So just keep that in mind as you're developing sort of your approach to engaging with artists, engaging with the community, that there's a certain amount that I think that the AC3 and other artists would kind of like to be the ones out front, engaging with people. And again, a little bit of a nervousness about an outside consultant being front and center all the time during the process. That's not an absolute thing. It's just a sensitivity to be aware of. That Heather and I are quite honestly still trying to navigate and figure out what's the best way to do this. And everybody's sensitivity and perceptions around this is a little bit different. So there's no one size fits all that will make everybody happy. But it is a sensitivity that we're trying to be aware of, and we would encourage you all to be aware of as well in terms of how out front you are versus sort of empowering and encouraging our local artist stakeholders to be the ones that are engaging other artists and other people in the community as we develop this plan. It's a delicate thing, and quite honestly, Heather and I have never done this before for an arts and culture plan. So we don't know of a perfect way to do it or a near perfect way to do it, and we welcome your consultation on how to do that, and with the hopes that you've had good experience in other communities with that sort of sensitivity around doing those things. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
I will add to that I think one of the things Kevin is talking about that as planners we're all kind of familiar with is a lot of communities have the planning fatigue, right? That feeling of there's a group that comes in and does a plan and then they're gone and we don't know what, and we don't see the results of it, or we don't, right? And as part of that, one thing we've heard is from AC3 folks is we don't feel that we've been valued for our time in previous studies or research. And that includes a city, but it doesn't just include the city, right? It includes private side, it includes foundations and philanthropic efforts. So that was really the impetus for establishing those specific community strategies, is to really value people's time. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Hopefully we were able to answer questions. We weren't able to answer all of them, but we will follow up. It's one of the first things I learned in government, was that it's important to be able to say, I don't know, but I know how to find the answer, and we can follow up. We also will be taking the questions from this meeting and putting it in the responses to all the questions that we get, even the ones that are emailed, right? We're going to collect all those questions with responses, and that will give us a chance to really consider all the questions that we got today a little more. So make sure you pay attention when we email out to you all those responses, because it does give us a chance to really best consider all of those questions from you all. Yeah. Okay. So if there are no more questions, it's 11:45. We're getting out early. So thank you all for your time. Please email me any questions that you come up with up to the question deadline. I'm your person for that. Kevin, Johanna, do you have any other last thoughts?
Just one other thing. Thank you for all the folks that entered their information in the chat. If you're interested in partnering, if you didn't quite happen to copy all of that information, feel free to reach out to Heather. We will have captured this chat if you wanted to make sure that you got all the information from people that entered that in the chat. We can get that to you if you're interested.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank
Take
you
care.
very much.
We look forward to
you.
seeing your proposals.